Welcome.
Shalom.
Shalom. Okay, let's get started.
Isaiah 14, verse 12. How you have fallen from the Shemayim. Fallen. That's aimed down. How you have fallen from the Shemayim, O Hillel, son of the morning. You have been cut down to the ground. Who was cut down, and which direction is that down? You who laid low the Gentiles. Who was it that caused the Gentiles to go what direction? Low. It was Hasatan who caused them to go down. Verse 13, for you have said in your heart, let me go up. Hasatan is saying he wants to raise himself. Let me go up to the Shemayim. Let me raise, again, there is the direction up. Let me raise my throne above, note that word above and where that is located, above the stars of El, the stars being the Matzeroth. Let me raise my throne above the stars of El, and let me sit in the mount of meeting. What is the mount of meeting? Mount is Har, and meeting is Moed. Let me sit in the mount of meeting on the sides of the north. Hasatan has just declared that he is going to be in control of the Mo-edim. How does he do this? What is his proposal? He would prefer that you didn't observe the Mo-edim, not at all. But he has said, okay, if you're going to do the Mo-edim, if you insist on obeying the scriptures, then I'm going to derail you and I'm going to put you on my schedule, on my time. Verse 14, let me go up where? Above the heights of the clouds. Let me be like the Most High. Hasatan is elevating himself. Verse 15, but you are brought down to the grave, to the sides of the pit. Brought down. Is that a place of authority? Is the grave and the pit of hell, is that a place of authority? I hope you've noticed these directions and the issues and situations that go with these directions, because that is what we're going to be looking at in this PowerPoint. Hasatan has said, if you want to do the feasts, then do it on my time. Are we going to agree with this tradition, or are we going to go back to the Hebrew words and bear them out, study them out, put them on charts and see what they say and get Yahuah's restored truth? This is going to be a teaching from Yah's covenant calendar. Revelation 12:1. Is the message of the moon, as taught to us from eons of time, dating back to Jericho, is it, 1, a profound foundation from Yahuah? How about the message of the moon? Is it a false doctrine from Baal? Two entirely different concepts, and we need to make a decision on where we're going to give our allegiance. Pertinent questions. Will the bride of Yahuah standing on the moon in Revelation 12:1 provide a true foundation for determining Yahuah's appointed times, the Mo-edim, by leaning upon the popular teachings of many prominent leaders? In other words, will the bride of Yahuah give allegiance to the popular teachings that are rooted and centered upon the moon for the purposes of determining Yahuah's appointed times? Where have you heard the teachings that we are to follow the moon for Yahuah's appointed times? Did you hear that out of the scriptures? Or did you hear it being suggested out of the scriptures? That is what we need to decide. Will Revelation 12:1 instruct us that the message of the moon has been overcome and soundly defeated by appearing to be trampled underfoot by the bride of Yahuah at the end of time? Yes, that terminology is very intentional. Does Revelation 12:1 point us to the actual visual event within the Mazzaroth? What visual event would that be? I remember the first time I learned that Bethula is an event that you can see in the stars every about September 23 every year. I was blown away. You mean you can actually see the words of the scriptures in the sky at night? Really? Yes, it's true. When compared to the authentic Tekufa mandate established by our Creator, will this constellation reveal the true authority of the moon in terms of Yahuah's Mo-edim cycles? Revelation 12:1. And a great sign was seen in the heaven. Would a sign, and we see that referenced first in Genesis 1:14, would a sign seen within the Mazzaroth of the heavens be worthy of consideration by the bride of Yahusha? Will people searching the word before it occurs, Shema? What is Shema? Our Western civilization says that Shema means to listen, but the Hebrew means that we must Shema, listen and act accordingly. It's not acceptable just to listen. We must act accordingly. What if this great sign was highly specific of an absolute condition, describing Yahusha's chosen people near the closing period of time on this earth? Is it an absolute condition, or can we pass it off? A sign gives strong indication to the context. A great sign was seen in the Shemayim, a woman clad with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Why not 13? Why does the scripture have 12 there? Is this a clue, or is this something that we should just overlook? The woman described here is none other than Bethula, the bride of Yahusha. Let's look into the description of her glory. And once again, yes, this is a constellation in the Mazzaroth, and it is of great significance. Revelation 12:1a. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven. John attributed a very high importance to the event he was about to describe. It was a great wonder, and it still is. It was and is something to behold for all the generations to follow him. What captivated John's mind? Each detail of this sign/wonder must be considered as a highly important revelation of truth. Bethula's exaltation. Revelation 12:1b. And a woman clothed with the sun. Do you note it does not say clothed with the moon? There is no moonlight. It is the sunlight that is around her. This speaks directly of Bethula, the Virgin constellation, one of the 12 constellations within the Mazzaroth. Bethula occurs in this descriptive format late in September of the Gregorian calendar. It is an actual celestial event that can be observed in the heavens. What and who provides Bethula with an aura of glory? Bethula has been clothed and covered with the light of the sun. The light of the sun portrays everything which gives the virgin bride of Yahusha her magnificent glory. It is the light of the sun. Was it the sun itself that enveloped Bethula with incredible glory? No, it is light from the sun. The actual sun orb is not even present in the sky. The orb of the sun is a secondary factor. It is the light of the sun which gives her glory. In this picture, notice the enlarged moon below her feet. Who enlarged this moon? And why is she standing directly on top of the moon? Is that what we see in the scriptures? Is that what we see in the constellations in the sky? Or is this a designer picture? Has this moon been enlarged and put directly under her feet with an agenda? If it does have an agenda, who did it? Where did it come from? Did it come from man? Or ultimately, was it from a higher power? As the sun sets in the western sky and the residual sunlight is still present, the constellation of Bethula appears in the eastern sky. She is enveloped with the light from the sun. This is her eternal splendor. The next part of this verse is very important. Revelation 12:1c. And the moon under her feet. Remember that verse we read in Isaiah. What went up and what went down? Here we see the moon under her feet. Question: does this text solidly indicate that Bethula is standing on the moon as a foundational platform for her existence? That is what I was taught. I followed the moon for many years, and I was taught that yes, this is her foundation for belief system, and you need to follow it. That's what I was taught. But then I learned to question things. The moon under Bethula's feet. In the autumn, the full moon shows itself under the feet of Bethula, but not every year. This occurs 1 out of 3 years. In the constellations, the moon is not touching the feet of Bethula. Please note that. The moon is not touching the feet of Bethula and does not portray her as using it as a secure foundation for her platform. Yes, the full moon is near her feet, a short distance away. We are going to explore this factor very soon. First, we will consider the entire verse, Revelation 12:1d. And upon her head a crown of 13. No, scripture doesn't say 13. It says a crown of 12 stars, one per month. Is the 13th star AWOL? Why did Yahuah inspire 12 and not 13? Is there a reason? 12 stars in her crown, 12 constellations, one for each month. See Revelation 22:2. What does the lunar-based calendar require? It requires a 13th month about every third year. Why a 13th month? Why is there no mention of a 13th month in the scriptures? And yes, there is no 13th month in the scriptures. Although we are told there is, we are told very, very many times that Ezekiel says there is a 13th month. However, when you study the books of Ezekiel or the scrolls of Ezekiel, and you put them in their proper order as he wrote them and as he numbered them, you will understand very clearly the order that he wrote them. In that correct order, there is not even a possibility, not even remote, that Ezekiel spoke of a 13th month. Also, Ezekiel uses the word Shane. I can't remember, but I think it's 11 or 12 times in his book of Ezekiel. That word Shane removes any and all possibility of a 13th month. It vaporizes the idea of a 13th month. And that word Shane comes from Genesis 1:14. Yahuah eliminated the lunar system right from Genesis 1:14. The 13th month supposedly corrects the lunar calendar after it has digressed astray from the seasons. Now I ask you, when Yahuah makes something, is it a problem? Does it go astray? Why? Why are we taught that this lunar calendar that goes astray from the seasons needs to be intercalated or adjusted so that it doesn't run away from the correct seasonal sequence? Is that a work of Yahuah that is flawed? Heaven forbid. Doesn't the Hebrew word shaneh eliminate this nonsense of digressing astray from the seasons? Absolutely it does. When understood in its entirety, shaneh provides the absolute base foundation for the covenant calendar of Yahuah and eternity. Returning to the position of the moon, Revelation 12:1c, and the moon where? Under her feet. The question is, why is the moon, which has been deemed and taught by man to be the divine authority for determining time, why is it located under the feet of the woman of Revelation 12:1? Do the scriptures provide any information about this under the feet positioning? Should we go to a rabbi and ask about this, or shall we go to the scriptures and get a scriptural understanding? Before we go further, please allow me to submit to you that being at the foot of Yahusha exposes an entirely different context than being under the foot of Yahusha. Two very, very different concepts. Personally, I would prefer to be at the foot of Yahusha. Please avoid these two concepts. They are not similar, they are entirely different. Position, power of authority, or two, power relinquished. What about these positions? For an answer, we need to look at scriptural examples regarding positioning. Genesis 24:2. And Abraham said to the oldest servant of the house, who ruled over all that he had, please put your hand under my thigh. Genesis 47:29. And the time for Israel to die drew near, and he called his son Joseph and said to him, now if I have found favor in your eyes, please put your hand under my thigh and show kindness and truth to me. Please do not bury me in Mitzrayim, or Egypt. These under positions are not displaying power and strength. They are positions of voluntary submission to superior authority. Is there power, control, and authority exuding from under these feet? Let's read 2 Kings 9:33. Then he said, throw her down. And they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered on the wall and on the horses. And he trampled her where? Under foot. Jezebel was eaten by the dogs. Isaiah 14:25. That I will break the Assyrian in my land, and upon the mountains tread him under foot. Then shall his yoke depart from off them, and his burden depart from off their shoulders. Can we associate treading underfoot with break? The Assyrian authority was and will be stripped from them and will be placed where? Under the feet. Is that a place of authority? A mighty nation that tramples underfoot. Isaiah 18:7. In that time, a present shall be brought to Yahuah of hosts, from a people tall and smooth skinned, and from a people awesome from their beginning onward, a nation mighty and trampling, whose land the rivers have divided, to the place of the name of Yahuah of hosts, to Mount Zion. To trample is to crush with force. Trampling produces a crushed and defeated product, not a production platform for a ruling authority. Being underfoot in this example has produced an effective elimination of authority. The mighty nation conquers over the deficient entities. Underfoot and crushed. Jeremiah 12:10. Many shepherds have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion underfoot. They have made my pleasant portion become a deserted wilderness. Lamentations 1:15. Yahuah hath trodden underfoot all my mighty men in the midst of me. He hath called an assembly against me to crush my young men. Yahuah hath trodden the virgin, the daughter of Yehudah, as in a winepress. What happens in a winepress? Are not the grapes crushed under the feet? Do they remain a full and complete grape, or are they crushed? Is it a position of authority? Daniel 8:13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint, which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? Transgression of desolation, and it will be trodden under the foot. Is there any authority from under the foot? Matthew 5:13. Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under the foot of men. Where's the authority there? Hebrews 10:29. Of how much sorer punishment, suppose ye, shall he be thought worthy who hath trodden under foot the Son of Yahuah, and hath counted the blood of the covenant wherewith he was sanctified an unholy thing, and hath done despite unto the Spirit of grace, who hath trodden under foot the Son of Yahuah? Will he be worthy? Where is the authority and exaltation there? Revelation 11:2. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city shall be tread under foot 42 months. Tread underfoot. Will that city be rebuilt into glory? Or is it going to be a trampling, a destruction situation? Again, underfoot. Where is the authority? Revelation 12:1, moon under her feet. These are some very clear scriptural indications of authority being purposely positioned under the feet. Under the feet is not a position of power and authority, as the men of Yahudah has taught us. Did you ever hear that? Go ask a rabbi. Where do these rabbis come from? Is it not from the religion of Judah? Continuing on, neither does the moon have any authority by being located under the feet of the bride of Yahusha in Revelation 12. The bride of Yahusha in Revelation 12:1 is not portraying a picture of the bride as incorporating the lunar-based system of worship for praising Yahuah. Quite the contrary. The moon being under the feet is a sign that the moon involuntarily relinquishes all power and authority. Why a sign? Isn't this in the stars? Did not Yahushua tell us in Genesis 1:14 that the stars were to be for signs? Are we looking at these signs? Are we paying attention to the end times? Or are we passing it off? Yes, the moon in Revelation 12:1 is portrayed as having no authority whatsoever. Joseph's oppression under the foot of Potiphar, Genesis 39:20. Then Joseph's master, Potiphar, took him and put him into the prison, a place where the sovereign's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. Joseph no longer ruled Potiphar's household from prison. Joseph was oppressed by Potiphar and definitely under the foot of Potiphar. What position was given to Joseph as a second in command under Pharaoh? What position was that? Joseph's authority, the second chariot of Pharaoh. Genesis 41:42. And Pharaoh took his seal ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. There's a point of exaltation. And he dressed him in garments of fine linen. More exaltation, more lifting up, and put a gold chain around his neck. Glorification. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried out before him, "Bow the knee!" And he set him over all the land of Mitzrayim. Joseph was no longer under the foot of anyone, but he has been elevated, yes, elevated to the position of Pharaoh's second in command. Elevated. Is that where the moon under the feet of Bethulah is? In an elevated position? Or is it below? Big difference. Joseph did not rule Mitzrayim from a position of oppression, that of being at the bottom. Joseph was given glory and honor, which was displayed when he rode in the second chariot of Pharaoh. It was an elevated position. Yahuah provided for Joseph the top ruling position available in the land. His authority was recognized from being exalted, not from being placed underfoot. The opposite was true when Joseph was placed in prison by Potiphar, a position of under Potiphar's foot. At that moment, Joseph's authority over the immediate house of Potiphar was vanquished instantly. However, we need to remember that in short order, Joseph was elevated to a position of authority under the prison guard. Yahuah was looking after him. Yahuah expresses his thoughts. What does our Creator and Father proclaim about his thoughts on man's acclaimed authority as given to the moon? Isaiah 1:12. When you come to appear before me, who has required this from your hand? To trample my courtyards. Trample, isn't that desecration? Who is desecrating the courtyards of Yahuah? Who is that? Note what chapter this is in. Isaiah 1. The context here makes this very clear. Does trampling produce an authority which is under the foot? Expressed contempt. Isaiah 1:13. Stop bringing futile offerings, incense. It is an abomination to me. New moons, an abomination. Sabbaths, an abomination. The calling of meetings, an abomination. I am unable to bear what? unrighteousness and assembly. What is it about these new moons, these Sabbaths, and these calling of meetings that make it unrighteousness? What is it? What did we read in Isaiah 14 where Ha-Satan said he was going to control the mount of meetings, the Mo-edim? Is there a direct relation here? Why does Yahuah declare the new moons, the Shabbats, and the assemblies unrighteousness? We need to pay attention here. The Hebrew nation was most certainly observing all the Sabbaths, the appointed times and festivals. We have no doubt about that. What made Yahuah express his emphatic contempt for the way the Israelites were worshiping him? What and why? These are the two questions that we need to pay serious attention to. Isaiah 1:14. Please read these words carefully and internalize them. My being, these are Yahuah's words, my being hates your new moons and your appointed times. They are a trouble to me. I am weary of bearing them. Pretty strong words. And when it comes from our Creator and our Father, it's exponentially stronger. Why were these appointed times declared your new moons and your appointed times? Why does Yahuah distance himself and reject the worship of the Israelites if they were observing his Sabbaths, his feasts, and his festivals? What characteristic had the Israelites incorporated into their worship system that caused Yahuah to vehemently loathe the worship of the Hebrew nation? Isaiah 1:15. And when you spread out your hands, I hide my eyes from you. When you spread out your hands, isn't that what we do when we pray? We lift our hands to Yahuah. He does not recognize our hands being lifted up to him. Why? I'll start this again. And when you spread out your hands, I hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, what? I do not hear. Is that not a terrifying concept when Yahuah does not hear our prayers? If this does not raise a red flag, I do not know what does. Continuing on, your hands have become filled with blood. What pagan worship practice caused Yahuah to reject their worship? Isaiah 1:16. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. This is talking spiritually. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, put away the what? The evil of your doings from before my eyes. Stop doing evil. That's not a suggestion. That is a command. Stop doing evil. What evil was being practiced by the Israelites in their observance of the Sabbaths, feasts, and festivals? Amos 5:21. I have hated, I have despised your festivals, and I am not pleased with your assemblies. Yahuah gives clear commands in the Torah for the observation of the Shabbats and feast assemblies. Is it possible that Yahuah hates the pagan lunar traditions that have been covertly infused into the observance of his set-apart appointed times? Covertly infused. Can we read syncretism here? Think about it. We have been taught to treat all of these texts as speed bumps before a stop sign. Yes, when I looked after, or when I paid allegiance to the moon, I was told, oh no, these texts do not pertain to us. We do not have to worry about those. They were spiritualized away. These speed bumps put before us, I had been steered away from. Oh yes, we realize an uncomfortable feeling, it arouses us from our sleepiness. It warns us of possible doom. But like some drivers, people do not take the signs seriously. Signs. Genesis 1:14, Yahuah said that the stars were going to be for signs. Are we taking it seriously, or are we looking well too far away from where we are going? They continue driving by traditional design through the warning signs provided by Yahuah. They continue merrily along their way, completely oblivious to the warning signs provided to save our very life. Do I need to say more about this picture? This was me many years ago. This was my attitude. Who, me? A sign. When learning to drive a vehicle, extreme importance is commanded towards the condition required upon seeing this sign. A certain action for a performed condition is required to preserve life. A picture with a message. A visual message. Have we heard that a picture is worth 1,000 words? Is this not what Yahusha inspired in Isaiah? Stop doing evil. See that enlarged moon? A picture is worth 1,000 words. Me? What is it? Yahuah tells us unequivocally that the moon is not to guide our worship allegiance. Yahuah destroyed Jericho and placed a curse on the one who rebuilds the city. Have we granted enough attention to this? Or will we regard the event but ignore the greater significance? The Hebrew language reveals a deeper understanding that the curse is placed on the ones who rebuild the worship practices of the moon. Yes, the first level of understanding is that the curse is on the people who rebuild the city. But the deeper understanding is the curse is placed on the ones who rebuild the worship practices of the moon. Where today do we get the most prominent message to follow the moon? What are we told? Who are we told to look to for our information? Where do we go for our resources, our information? Her crowning glory, Revelation 12, declares the moon as being positioned under the feet of the bride. What is the crowning glory of the bride of Yahusha? It is the Matzeroth, the 12 constellations that Yahuah has declared as the crowning glory for the bride of Yahusha. Why is there 12 stars and not 13 in her crown? Where did that 13th star go? Or did it ever even exist? That is the question. Again, a picture worth 1,000 words, a scriptural message. Yahusha's words, Matthew 5:20, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the heavens." Let me read that again. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds, goes far beyond and well above that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means, in no possible way, in any way, shape, will you be able to enter into the reign of the heavens. Is our belief system going to exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees? Are we going to pay attention to the Torah? Or are we going to go by tradition? What were the Pharisees and the leadership of the Second Temple doing? Were they observing appointed times and the seasons according to the moon? Have you read in the Qumran scrolls how the Zadokite priests living there fully documented and emphatically despised the usurped priesthood? What were the Pharisees and the leadership of the Second Temple doing? Do you recall when Yahushua was 12 years old, when he was found 3 days after the Jewish feast? What was he doing? Why was he found in the temple? What was his answer to his mother? Did you not know that I must be about my father's business? What was his father's business? If we go to Exodus 23, we read there that all males must present themselves at these specific feasts of Yahuah. So what was Yahushua doing 3 days after the Jewish feast in the temple? If we look at the lunar calendar of the time, the lunar calendar of the Second Temple era, and we put covenant calendar beside it, Yahushua was observing the high Sabbath of unleavened bread. That's why he said to his mother, do you not know that I must be about my father's business? Yahushua was observing his feasts, the feast of his father, on the covenant calendar, the one that was blood ratified at Mount Sinai. If he had not been there, Yahushua would have been a sinner, and we would not have a Messiah. Yes, there was two calendars at that time. One was the lunar calendar, and the other was the one that Yahushua was observing. What one are we on? This impostor priesthood of the Second Temple era included determining appointed times, feasts, and festivals by moon reckoning. Yes, the scriptures document this clearly, and so does history. Lunar deception trampled. In Revelation 12:1, the bride, Bethula, is eliminated by the what? By the light of the sun. The light of the sun, notice the spelling, provides the glory. The moon is not providing any light of glory whatsoever. Why? Because the moon does not have light. And there are texts in the scriptures that when you look at the Hebrew words, it proves it beyond any shadow of a doubt. The moon has no light. It does not matter what man declares. The lunar traditions are of no value because the bride of Yahushua has risen above and trampled the false deception of the moon for determining the feasts and festivals. The bride of Yahushua at the end of time will have victory. That victory came from Jericho. We're going to look at that a little bit farther. Observed where? Where is that moon? That moon for determining the feasts and festivals is below her feet. Is that a position? Is that a scriptural position of authority, or is it a scriptural position of defeat? Relinquished authority. Again, we come to some pictures. Stop doing evil. The lunar system, Yahuah deemed it as an abomination. Are we going to continue with our tradition? Mazzaroth based appointed times. Isaiah 2:1. The word that Yeshayahu, the son of Amoz, saw concerning Yehuda and Jerusalem, and it shall be in the latter days. Is that where we are? In the latter days, that the mountain, the Mo-edim of the house of Yahuah, is established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Question: What is it about the mountain, the Mo-edim, that will be reestablished in the latter days? If it has to be reestablished, does that mean it had been removed and lost at one point? What did Yahushua do? Yahushua witnessed against the lunar calendar, and his words in John 7 are that its works are wicked. Yahushua didn't play with his words. He got right to the point. Are we listening? I'm going to read this again. What is it about the mountain, the Mo-edim, that will be reestablished in the latter days if they were already established when Yahushua was living on the earth? Again, what was it that was removed? What is inclusive with Yahuwah's Mo-edim that will be reestablished toward the end times? And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. Are we going to be restoring those paths? Or are we going to be desecrating the courtyards with a contaminated belief system? My friends, I hope we choose to reestablish and restore the paths of the Torah. Isaiah told us 7 times, if we want to understand the ending, we must know the beginning. What is it at the beginning? The lunar system was not official until the Second Temple era. The lunar system was adopted after the sundial incident with Hezekiah. Let's restore what come before the lunar system. Important. The covenant calendar of Yahuah has 0 lunar connections. It is not a luni-solar calendar, but is a fully light-based calendar. If the blood-ratified Matzeroth light-based calendar is to be reestablished toward the end of time, what type of calendar was in operation while Yahushua was living on the earth? I think we already know that. There is a PowerPoint called Yahusha's Contempt, and it exposes Yahushua and directly addresses this calendar issue through witnessing while he was on this earth. Yahushua witnessed very, very strongly against that. One of the strongest witnesses is in John 7. What about this possibility? What if Isaiah was prophesying of the imminent victory of the bride, see Revelation 12:1, pertaining to the latter days, close to the end of the 6,000 years of allotted earthly time? What if there was an imminent victory coming? And what if Isaiah is forecasting that the lunar calendar will be replaced and the Mo-edim will once again be restored and centered on the covenant calendar? What if Isaiah is correct? Yahuah hates the lunar calendar because it is based upon the infusion of false pagan and lunar traditions on his Mo-edim. Isaiah 2:2. And it shall be when? In the latter days, that the mountain, the Mo-edim, the house of Yahuah, is established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Will it be our choice to be part of this, which is going to be reestablished by Yahuah? Are we going to be there, or are we going to walk in tradition? Recognition of old paths restored. Questions about the reestablishment of old paths to dwell in. The old paths to dwell in, you'll see that in Jeremiah 6:16. Can Isaiah be speaking about the light-based Mo-edim, which are forever to be determined by the statutes of Yahuah? Is Jeremiah prophesying of an imminent correction that will be made to man's traditions, which are hated by Yahuah? That is in reference to Isaiah 1:11-16. Let's read again in Isaiah 2:3. And many peoples, excuse me, and many peoples shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahuah, to the house of the to the house of the Elohim of Yaakov, and let him teach us his ways. That would be the celestial light-based timing. And let us walk in his paths, the Matzaroth-based circuits. For out of Zion comes forth the Torah and the word of Yahuah from Jerusalem. Let him teach us his ways. That word for ways in Hebrew is derek, and it indicates clearly, directly towards the cyclical feasts that in the Hebrew system of worship, Yahuwah's covenant calendar. Let him teach us his ways. Mountain, does that equal Mo-edim? Is there a connection? Is there an acceptable scriptural example to show a direct connection from mountain to the Mo-edim? What was the original statement from the dragon? What was his ultimate desire and intent? It was to usurp the worship of man intended for Yahuah to himself. Where is this found? Again, we're going to read Isaiah 14:13. For you have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens. Let me raise my throne above the stars of El. Let me sit in the mount of meeting on the sides of the north. Yes, the mount of meeting, the mount of the Mo-edim. The mountain Moed connection. Hey-resh, which is Har, is mountain, an elevated item ranging from earth protrusion to pregnancy, something raised up above other surrounding identities. The ER is from the interlinear scripture analyzer. In pregnancy, the tummy is raised up from the body. I figured I'd better put that in there so you didn't understand why I had pregnancy in there. But the tummy is raised up. That is with a description of Har, to be raised up. Excuse me. This mountain in Isaiah 2:2 is referencing the comprehensive foundation of eternal life based on righteousness within the statutes, the Mo-edim of Yahuah. This elevated above all else, Kodesh cyclical yearly schedule of worship oriented assemblies has a direct connection in the Hebrew language to the old paths, as seen in Jeremiah. The reestablishing confirmed. Jeremiah 6:16. Thus saith Yahuah, stand in the ways and see and ask for the old paths where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for yourselves. But they said, we do not walk in it. That last portion of the verse is very, very sad. Yahuah is asking them, telling them, stand in the cyclical Hebrew ways, in the feasts of mine, on my time. Ask for the old paths. Come back to my system. But they said, no, we do not want it. Isaiah 58:12. And those from us among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you would be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. Are we going to be restoring the old paths from before Hezekiah's time? Or are we going to continue on with the traditions of man that occurred in the Second Temple era? the old paths. Is Noah's documentary old enough to consider his ways and as an example from the Torah that we may walk accordingly? Did Noah count according to the lunar system and smudge the documentation to hide truth? Of course not. We need to pay very close attention to Noah's account of the flood. Did Noah accurately record his epic voyage according to the Mazzaroth light-based calendar, exactly as the dates and numbers of days were exposed in the story? Was Noah accurate? Absolutely. Ask for the PowerPoint, Noah, Yahuah's chosen captain, and discover the extremely intense grade of accuracy in Genesis 7 and 8. And also read Matthew 24:7. That account of the flood with Noah eliminates the lunar calendar. It eliminates Enoch. It eliminates Zadok. It eliminates the Qumran, etc., etc., etc. Again, we need to do what Isaiah said. We must go back to the beginning to understand what is going to happen in the end. What old paths would Jeremiah have us restore and follow? Back to Isaiah 2. Where is it? Isaiah 2:4. And he shall judge between the nations and shall reprove many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither teach battle anymore. Verse 5. O house of Yaakov, come and let us walk in the light of Yahuah. Light, not the darkness of the moon. Let's walk in the light of Yahuah. This has been our instruction throughout the scriptures. We are told to look to the light. Is this instruction from Isaiah to walk according to the light of the moon? Where is the light from the moon? Has anyone seen light produced by the moon when there is no light from the sun to illuminate it? How much non-reflected light do you observe emitting from the moon during a full eclipse? Did you see the moon emitting any light, any whatsoever? That orb of the moon does not have light. It does not emit light. That factor alone isolates it from Genesis 1:14, where Yahuah said he made two great lights. The moon is not a light. It does not have light. The moon cannot determine the day from the night. It cannot separate light from night as required in Genesis 1:14. We see the moon in a beautiful blue sky for half of the month. We see the moon at night for some of the month, reflecting the sunlight. The moon cannot separate the light from the darkness, and that is a requirement from Genesis 1:14. So what two lights separate the light from the darkness? Of course, we see the sun in the daytime, in the light season. It separates the night from the darkness. And we see the Mazzaroth and all the stars at night. We do not see them in the light. They have the capability of distinguishing and separating the light from the night. What about the moon? Why is it that we see the moon in its glory in a clear blue sky in the middle of the day? Sorry, the light does not, or the moon does not have light. It cannot separate the light from darkness. It is not one of the two great lights. What two identities recorded in Genesis 1:14 to 18 give light? Yes, it is the Mazzaroth and the sun. The moon emits no light. Isaiah continues, Isaiah 2:6. For you have forsaken your people, the house of Yaakov, because they have been filled from the east and practice magic like the Philistines, and they are pleased with the children of foreigners, filled with pagan traditions from people not interested in following Yahuah. Isaiah 2:7. And their land is filled with silver and gold, and there is no end to their treasures. And their land is filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. And their land is filled with idols. They bow themselves to the work of their own hands, to what their own fingers have made. Read that again. They bow themselves to the work of their own hands, to what their own fingers have made. I want you to think about this very carefully because Charlene is going to be doing the next 2 slides for us. And I want you to think about this. I'm going to read it again. They bow themselves to the work of their own hands, to what their own fingers have made. They choose to worship the Baals of the pagan religions, including following the human manufactured lunar traditions of the same pagan people. This is why Yahuah hates and utterly despises the lunar-based calendar and its traditional assemblies. I want you to listen very carefully to what Charlene has to read in the next 2 slides. Go ahead, Charlene.
Well, we've had a lot of scriptures already that have shown us, what the object lesson is about moon worship, but it's always good to have a little bit of secular historical history as well. So where was the beginning of this moon worship? This is an article that actually comes from 2014. It has this to say: a 5,000-year-old stone structure in the shape of the crescent moon in northern Israel has been identified to be an ancient monument predating much of the construction of Stonehenge in England and the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Now, before I go any further, this is saying a 5,000-year-old stone. That takes us back to about 1,000 years after creation. We know that Adam lived 930 of those years, so this is dating back to the time of just after when Adam passed away. Well, who was his first son? It was Cain. I see this as dating back to Cain as possibly starting this moon worship. Just keep that in mind. I often thought that maybe this moon worship didn't really start until Nimrod in Babylon, but I think it went back further than that. You can look this up on the internet. The structure known as Rejum and Nabi Shu'ab of Jethro Karn, I'm sure I slaughtered that, is located near the Sea of Galilee. Now, this is also interesting that this is up in Galilee. It was initially discovered in the early part of the 20th century and was thought to form part of the ancient city's defensive walls. But doctoral student Ido Wachel from Hebrew University in Jerusalem recently made a convincing case that the construction served as a monument in its own right. Now, it's not actually a statue. It's actually something that's in the field. We're going to read about that. The proposed interpretation for this site is that it constituted a prominent landmark in its natural landscape. That's the landscape of the surface of the earth, serving to mark possession and to assert authority and rights over natural resources by a local rural or pastoral population. Mr. Wachel wrote in a paper submitted to an archaeology conference in Switzerland. We're just going to continue this quote on the next slide. So just some interesting things. Because this moon worship, it didn't start with Nimrod. It probably started right back there with Cain. Presenting his findings at the International Congress on the Archaeology of the Ancient Near East, Mr. Wachel said the structure may have been erected to honor the ancient Mesopotamian moon god Sin. One of the most important gods in Mesopotamian mythology is Sin, also known as Nana. It is symbolized as a crescent moon and is often depicted riding on a winged bull. You can find those reliefs everywhere on the internet. The structure was found close to the ancient Israeli town Bet Yorah. And I went and looked up where that was. It is actually very, very close to the Sea of Galilee. So this is up in Galilee. This is not down in Judah, which translates as a house of the moon god and is believed to be linked to the town's religious community. And that structure is about as long as a football field. Now, what I wanted to say was, because it's found up in Galilee, is really interesting because we know it was in Galilee where the light came, and that those people in Galilee actually understood the dawn day. But we also know that Yahusha's parents were following the festival system that was marked by the lunar moon months down in Judah. And that's another whole study. So that's just kind of a little bit of interesting information there from secular history. They're saying that it was about as long as a football field, 150 meters. And look at this, a volume of 14,000 cubic meters, and they think it took probably 5 months to build. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Charlene. It gives another meaning to bowing down to the things that they have made with their own hands. Very sad when you think about it. Once again, it is very clear that the descendants of Cain were directly involved with the moon worship in the vicinity of 5,000 years ago. Scripture declares it, and history documents it. Yahusha directly opposed moon worship while he was living on the earth. The Qumran scrolls record the evil of the lunar-based calendar insidiously overtaking the covenant calendar worship services during the Hasmonean period just before Yahusha came to this earth. Isaiah forecasts about the mountain of Yahuah being re-established in the latter times. What then could possibly be replacing these present lunar-based Mo-edim that Yahuah so vehemently abhorred? What is going to be replacing them? Will you be part of it? Could it be that the bride of Yahusha, that's Bethulah of the Matzeroth, found in Revelation 12:1, that bride, is she presently overcoming and will be victorious, defeating the false lunar system of worship? Does that perk up your ears? I hope so. Could it be the bride, and that is Yahuwah's people, will cause allegiance to the moon to be trampled underfoot in the latter days? Could it be Yahuwah's word actually declares a reality? A very simple question, something to think about. Yahusha's words, Matthew 11:30, "For my yoke is gentle and my burden is light." Yahusha spoke these words while on earth in the time that the lunar-based system of darkness was prevailing. In the Second Temple era, moon-based worship proceedings from the Hasmonean period were the protocol of the impostor priesthood. When Yahusha spoke the word light, was he simply referencing an issue of weight? Maybe on the surface level. However, in a deeper look, he was referencing the Matzeroth light-based calendar, which reestablishes the Mo-edim back onto his blood-ratified covenant calendar. This is the calendar that was agreed to by the nation, the Hebrew nation, 3 times before it was blood-ratified on Mount Sinai and sealed with a meal. Is that what's going to be reestablished at the end of time? Count on it. When Yahusha witnessed the evil proceedings of the Second Temple lunar-based worship system, is it any wonder that his burden would be to return to the Matzeroth light-based covenant calendar? We find that in Matthew 11:30. A return, that is a teshuvah. Let's turn around from our traditions of man and return to what Yahuah wrote in the Torah. Let's remove the moon from our worship system. Yahusha's bride will have previously returned to the Melchizedek administration. Paul addresses his brothers in the faith. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. They understood the covenant calendar as witnessed to in James 1:17. Maybe we can talk about that verse after this presentation. When the lunar system removes the key to understanding, and we read that very clearly in Luke 11:52, you have removed the key to understanding. Was that meaning by offsetting the Mo-edim, the appointed times, onto a calendar other than that of Yahuah's? Darkness then prevails. That is what Hasatan declared in Isaiah 14:13. He was going to rule the calendar. How did he do it? At that point, one is consistently enveloped in darkness and cannot know the truths of Yahuah and cannot correctly discern the set-apart times. That key to understanding is so important, and Yahusha says it was removed. Is that what's going to be restored? The key to understanding his feasts, his timing? Yahusha's return will then come as a complete surprise to those people who do not understand, as will also the Day of Atonement. Are we going to be in darkness, or are we going to take heed when Yahusha suggests and commands that we should look to the light? 1 Thessalonians 5:5, for you are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of night nor of darkness. The moral? Look to the light, not the darkness of the moon. This last statement sounds so simplistic that it is almost silly. 1 Corinthians 1:27, but Elohim has chosen the foolish matters of the world to put to shame the wise, and Elohim has chosen the weak of the world to put to shame the strong. Yahuah is magnificently efficient in simplicity if we allow it. I have found that if we accept the words with their Hebrew definitions as recorded in Scripture, the simplicity is absolutely astounding. It is man that insists on fouling things up with his own theories or confusion. Question: why do you think the moon is positioned under the feet of Bethulah, the bride of Yahusha? Charlene, after I finish reading this, you can feel free to jump in here and say something if you like. Isaiah 2:17, and the loftiness of man shall be bowed down. Please note that direction, down. And the pride of man shall be brought low. Under the feet maybe? And Yahuah alone shall be exalted in that day, and the idols completely pass away. Consider the Matzeroth. Yahuah purposely positioned the moon to be under the feet of Bethulah the bride. Can this visual sign be considered as being bowed down and brought low? Charlene, would you like to say something now or on the next slide?
Well, only thing I'd like to say is that when you look at these moon goddesses, that the moon symbol is always above the head. It is never under her feet. All of them are consistent about that. So let's look at your next slide.
Can this visual sign be considered? Sign. Didn't Yahuah say that the Mazzaroth stars were going to be for signs? Are we paying attention to the signs? Seems that paganism understood the position of authority as being located above the head. Note the sun disk cradled in the crescent moon in an exalted stance. Where? Above the head. Yet lunar teachers tell us that when Yahuah puts the moon under the feet of Bethula, that is the position of authority? Who has their wires crossed? Again, we need to question, why is that moon under the feet of Bethula? And what is the meaning? Isaiah 2:20. In that day, man shall throw away his idols of silver and his idols of gold, which they made, each for himself to worship, to the moles and to the bats. To go into the clefts of the rocks and into the crags of the rugged rocks because of the fear of Yahuah and the splendor of his excellency when he arises to shake the earth mightily. Cease from man. That is a command. That's not a suggestion. Cease from man, whose breath is in his nostrils. For in what is he to be reckoned upon? There's that little statue with a moon crescent on the chest. There is the Allah, the moon god, on a statue. No, Allah is not the same as Yahuah, as we have been told. Man does not need a physical representation before him to bow down to a foreign god. Bowing down may consist of simply paying allegiance to whatever false system is chosen, and by walking after it, which results in giving one's respect or sacred regard to that very practice. I'm going to read this one more time. Bowing down may consist of simply paying allegiance to, following the patterns that you have been taught, paying allegiance to whatever false system is chosen. And by walking after it, if we continue to walk in the traditions that cannot be supported by the scriptures, we do not have to physically bow down on our knees to worship it. If we are giving our allegiance, then we are bowing down to that concept to which Yahuah does not care for, which he emphatically despises. Isaiah 3:12. My people, youths exert pressure on them, and women rule over them. O my people, your leaders lead you astray and swallow the way of your paths. For the leaders of this people lead them astray, and those who are guided by them are swallowed up. At this time, there was a severe problem in Israel with worshiping the moon. And these are why Isaiah wrote these words. What do we have today? Who promotes the lunar calendar today? For the leaders of this people lead them astray, and those who are guided by them are swallowed up. Isaiah has just written to us about how much Yahuah despises the pagan traditions involving the moon. Look how clear Isaiah states it here. Involving the moon for your determination of moeds is against the will of Yahuah. Isaiah 3:8. For Jerusalem has stumbled, and Yehudah has fallen. Note that direction, fallen, that is down. Because their tongue and their doings are against Yahuah, to provoke the eyes of his steam. Their tongue, what do they teach? What calendar are they teaching? What lunar characteristics Are we coerced into believing? Are they against Yahuah? Bethulah's victory. Bethula, the virgin bride of Yahusha, seen in Revelation 12:1, has overcome, and that is trampled underfoot, the abomination found in the pagan moon worship. You see that enlarged moon? The agenda under that is to coerce us, convince us that we are to follow the lunar system of worship. That is an abomination. A picture is worth many more words than 1,000. It is worth eternal life. Next up, the Jericho fortress connection. Yod Resh, Yod Chet Vav, Jericho, H 3405. Jericho was the city of the moon. Here's the word for moon, H 3394, Yerach. Please note these Hebrew characters in these words. These are a family, or these are in a family of words. They are next to each other. They have basically the same meaning. That is why Jericho is very, very close to the word Yerach, which means moon. Very, very similar. Jericho, once again, was the center of moon worship. I am getting some noise in here. If we could shut off the microphones, please, I would appreciate it. Jericho was the central axis of moon worship indoctrination. The fortress walls of Jericho protected the center of moon worship at that time, protected as in a foundation. What were Joshua's commands concerning the city of the moon? Joshua 6:2. And Yahuah saith unto Joshua, See, I have given into thy hand Jericho and its king, mighty ones of valor. They were not just a little people, they were mighty ones of valor, strength. Verse 3, And ye have compassed the city, all the men of battle, going around the city once. Thus thou dost 6 days. There's 6 times that they were to be surrounding or marching around Jericho. Verse 4, And 7 priests do bear 7 trumpets of the Jubilee before the ark. And on the 7th day ye compass the city 7 times, and the priests blow with the trumpets. 6 plus 7. How many times in total did Joshua encompass the fortress of the moon? 6? 7? 12? What about 13? Why 13? What symbolic connection could this 13 have to do with Yahuah's program to eliminate Jericho? What identity do we know of that uses a base of 13? Here is a look at the so-called Hebrew calendar. I think it's a misnomer myself, because it is not scriptural. It is not Hebrew according to Yahuah's definitions. But this calendar has 12 or 13 months. It is fluid. It is fully adjustable and can be manipulated any way they choose. Adar 2 is the lunisolar calendar's 13th month. I would like you to go to John 7, if you can. John 7, and I want to read a verse out of John 7. We want to look at this fluidity of the calendar that can have a 12th month. And if you look at the 9th month, it can have 29 or 30 days. And if you look at the 8th month, it can have 29 or 30 days. However you want, it can be adjusted to fit your program. If you look at month number 12, you will see the word intercalary month. That word is ultra revealing. The word shane, or year, we see in Genesis 1:14, totally eliminates in every way possible. I should say it a little bit stronger. That word shane vaporizes any calendar that has anything to do with an intercalary action to reset it to be in line with the months. This intercalation is not from Yahuah. But let's read John 7. Yahusha's brothers had told him, "You go up to this festival, show us who you are, be somebody." They were doubting him. Yahusha, verse 6, Yahusha therefore said to them, "My time has not yet come." My time, and as in his covenant calendar feast, my time has not yet come, but your time, your lunar-based calendar, is always ready. Yahusha, knowing who he is, he knew fore and aft. He knew what happened to the lunar calendar behind him. He knew their adjustments. This word, when he says your time is always ready, if we look at that word in the Greek, it means it is fully adjustable. It can be manipulated. So Yahusha knew exactly what he was saying. He knew exactly what you're seeing on the screen in front of you, that things can be changed and adjusted accordingly to their lunar belief system. The intercalation system is a reset. Now let's read verse 7. It is impossible for the world to hate you, but it hates me because I bear witness of it that its works are wicked. You go up to this festival. I am not going up to this festival. My time has not yet been filled. On this portion of scripture, it is very, very interesting that when you lay out the lunar calendar beside covenant calendar, Yahusha went up halfway into their feast. Read verse 14. And about the middle of the feast, or the festival, Yahusha went up into the Mikdash. And what was he doing? He was teaching. If you lay these two calendars side by side, we see that Yahusha went up about the middle of the feast. Why? He went up for the seventh day Sabbath, and he was teaching in the tabernacle. A couple days later, what occurred? The Feast of Trumpets. Yahusha observed the Feast of Trumpets at that time. He did not go up to their Jewish festival. He went up to observe the seventh day Sabbath in the tabernacle and witness. He witnessed against it that its works are wicked. This is your Hebrew calendar, your lunar-based fluid calendar. Back to Jericho. One encompassing march, once per day for 6 days and 7 rotations around the city on the 7th day makes a total of 13 times. What happened on the 13th march around the city of the moon? Why 13? Does that resemble the 13th month? Is there a link? The lunar-based obstacle which opposed Yahuah in bringing his people into the promised land was not only defeated, but eliminated. The foundations of the lunar-based worship system were removed so that they did not impede the workers of Yahuah in accomplishing his plan to bring his people into the promised land. Do we see this with Bethulah having the moon under her feet? Will the lunar-based system be removed and eliminated from contention so that Yahuah can bring his people into the promised land? The great promised land? Is the event of Jericho a prophecy which is going to happen again? Count on it. Where were the foundations of the lunar worship positioned? Joshua 6:20. And the people shout and blow with trumpets, and it came to pass, when the people hear the voice of the trumpet, that the people shout, a great shout, and the wall falleth under it. Note the terminology, falleth under it. The foundations that protected the worship system of the city fell under it. And the people goeth up into the city, each over against him, and they capture the city. That was the verse out of Young's literal translation. Let's look at the scriptures. Joshua 6:20. And the people shouted when the priests blew the shofarot. And it came to be, when the people heard the voice of the shofar, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Down flat. And the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they captured the city. Please note that the men went straight before him. They did not have to clamber over the foundation of this moon worshiping city. That foundation was removed, taken out, made flat, and was no longer an impediment to them. They went straight into the city. Is this a prophecy of what is going to happen at the end of time? Is Yahushua going to remove moon worship for his people? Are we paying attention? Is a better question. It seems that by Hebrew definitions, the walls fell into the ground. There was no mound of rubble for an obstacle to hinder or restrict the army of Yahuah. All resistance in terms of accomplishing the goal of rapidly entering the city of the moon was eliminated by Yahuah. The foundations of moon worship were literally placed where? Under their feet, to be trampled upon by the Hebrew army, which were commanded to destroy the city of the moon. Can we apply this last paragraph to our end times today? Are we to take the foundations of moon worship and destroy them, placing them under our feet, out of authority, no longer to be considered? Are we part of the Hebrew army? Are we part of the Melchizedek priesthood? Are we commanded to destroy this moon worship system? Yahuah has provided sufficient resource tools to correctly discern the evils of moon worship, and just why he banished the moon to under the feet of his bride. The big question now lies with us. Will we grasp the opportunity, accepting Yahuah's offer to enter the promised land under his plan? Will we pay close attention to the words of the scriptures and Shema? Listen and act accordingly? Or will the same choice be made as the Hebrew nation when they sent spies into the promised land and failed to trust their Creator? This time, the sentence for failure to trust and obey is a fair bit longer than 40 years. It is now for eternity. Yahuah prepared the way to bring his people into the promised land of Canaan by removing the pagan impediment of lunar-based worship practices. We know well that Yahuah functions completely upon patterns. Is it possible that Yahuah has, from the example of the destroyed foundation of moon exaltation at Jericho, is it possible that because man persistently repeats his foolish patterns, that Yahuah has ensured that the foundation of the moon is reduced to waste once again to bring his people into the final promised land? Is that possible? Will we trust the words of the scriptures, or will we spiritualize them away and say, that does not pertain to me? Will we? When we go into the promised land, the scriptures say, with multiple words, multiple texts, it says, when we go in there, it will be sans lunar worship confusion. That word sans is a French word, and it means without. There will not be lunar worship confusion in the kingdom of Yahuah. There will not be lunar worship of any kind in that kingdom. Will Joshua and Isaiah be in agreement? Joshua was asked to destroy all traces of moon worship. 700 years later, will Isaiah give sacred regard to the moon? Here's some last thoughts to ponder. Will there be a huge problem determining time in the future? Isaiah 60:20. No longer does your sun go down. I'm okay with that. Nor your moon withdraw itself. I'm okay with that too. But what does that mean? What does this indicate? Nor your moon withdraw itself. How do you achieve, how does the sky achieve a new moon, a new crescent moon? That moon must withdraw itself to produce a crescent moon and the phases of the moon. It must withdraw itself. Yet Isaiah says, nor your moon withdraw itself. For Yahuah shall be your everlasting light, and the days of your mourning shall be ended. So, the moon will no longer withdraw itself. That means no longer changing phases, for it is the withdrawing process which changes the phases of the moon. This will make it very difficult observing worship practice to Yahuah from new moon to new moon, as written in Isaiah 66:23, when a new moon will be an impossibility. What was Isaiah thinking? What and how? Let's read Isaiah 66:23. And it shall be that from new moon to new moon, and from Shabbat to Shabbat, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuah. Here, Isaiah says we're going to be worshiping by the new moon. And yet, just a few chapters earlier, he said that there's not going to be new moons. What's up, Isaiah? What are you writing? What are you feeding us? Or is it somebody else? Did not Isaiah just inform us in chapter 60, verse 20, that the moon will no longer withdraw itself, thus eliminating the phases of the moon forever? How can Isaiah first tell us that the moon will no longer go through the phases, creating the renewing of the moon, and then, just a few chapters later, tell us that we will be worshiping according to the new moon? Is there a problem here somewhere? Is it Isaiah? Why is this a problem? First and foremost, the term new moon does not exist in the original Hebrew manuscript. I'll read that again. The term new moon does not exist in the original Hebrew manuscript. New moon exists only because of mistranslators' opinions. Second, why is this a problem? It is a most definite problem because a new moon can only occur as new if it withdraws and renew itself. Therefore, according to Isaiah 60, verse 20, there will not be any new moons in heaven, neither will there be phases of the moon. If one chooses to accept the lunar-based path, it will seem that Isaiah is very confused man with a totally opposed and equally confusing and contaminated message. Worshipping by the moon, which will not exist, this would be incredible confusion in heaven. It would also be Babylon's moon confusion message at its purest form. Who is the author of confusion? We know it's not Yahuah. Where is this confusion coming from? The lunar-based Isaiah option, number 1. Isaiah 60, verse 20. Again, we read this verse. No longer does your sun go down, nor your moon withdraw itself. There it is. There will not be moon phases or a crescent moon in the new kingdom of Yahuah, nor your moon withdraw itself. For Yahuah shall be your everlasting light, and the days of your mourning shall be ended. That's quite clear. If the new moon event is truth, Isaiah 66:23, then what Isaiah wrote in Isaiah 60, verse 20 is false. So what option do we have? Could Isaiah be declared a liar and a false prophet if the lunar-based theory has been accepted? Is it possible that Isaiah has been lying to us? Here is option number 2. Let's look at Isaiah 66:23 again. And it shall be that from new moon to new moon, and from Shabbat to Shabbat, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuah. Interesting. New moon. If the moon no longer withdraws itself, and we see that in Isaiah 60, verse 20, providing new phases, and namely a new moon, then Isaiah 66:23 is false. So what option do we have now? Is Isaiah still a liar and a false prophet? And that is, if the lunar-based theory has been accepted. But I thought I just declared that the words new moon did not exist in the original Hebrew manuscript. Why then do we see in this verse, new moon to new moon? Where did they come from? Has it created confusion? Has it created opposition? Has it created confusion? Sadly, if one chooses the lunar-based method of worship, then a devastating decision must be made concerning the opposing messages seen in Isaiah. We can be extremely thankful to Yahuah that he has given us another option revealed throughout the scriptures. The keys to understanding timing issues are, number 1, the Tekufa. Number 2, learning to count. Teach us to number our days that we may bring our hearts unto wisdom. Psalms 90, verse 12, I believe. Here's some clarification for new moon. The word chodesh, the basic meaning is the renewing and the rebuilding. Chodesh is a verb action type word, as seen in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, and has been mistranslated as new moon in our copies of the scriptures. This contamination in translation does not correctly reflect the true definitions extracted from the original Hebrew manuscript. It is a false translation derived from the time of the Metonic cycle. That is the 29.5-day lunar month, which was infused into the Second Temple worship services of the Hasmonean period just before Yahusha lived here. This is referencing the period after the sundial incident with Hezekiah, in which the lunar system was adopted by the Second Temple system. It is fully documented in the scriptures, and it is very well documented in history. Julian Morgenstern has done a magnificent job of documenting it. And interestingly, he is from the other side. He is from the lunar side. So he is very, very proud of what he documented. And it's a great resource for us. It is in the Hasmonean period. It is after 700 BC that this took place. With this adoption of the lunar system into the Second Temple era came sunset to sunset days around 450 BC. And there is so much more on that. The lunar system must operate with sunset to sunset days. They go hand in hand. They cannot be separated. The word Chodesh has absolutely zero connection to the moon. Chodesh, the renewing and the rebuilding in its basic form, when that word is applied to time, has direct reference to the first cycle or first day of the month. This word Chodesh, when we look up in our study sources, we will see the words new moon in the definitions. I'm asking you to please look at those words carefully, as you will see them in italics. That when it is in italics, there's a reason, because it is an inferred connection only. It is not fact. It is what they would desire or coerce you to believe. This word Chodesh, it is the desire of the dragon to connect this first day of the month with the lunar ideals of his own making. Shall we read Isaiah 14:13 again, where he claimed that he was going to control the Mo-edim? Could he do it with the word Chodesh and connecting it to a moon, putting us on a different schedule, that not of Yahuah, which when Yahuah has agreed to take out time from his schedule and meet with us, if we're on the lunar calendar, we are not there because it is a different schedule, is a different feast. Does it make any difference? Yes, Yahuah despises it, calls it an abomination, and says, stop doing evil. When one examines closely in our personal research sources, one will find that the moon has but an inferred connection only. It is not factual. Starting with the Torah, we have ultra clear instruction to the non-existence of the lunar calendar in Yahuah's kingdom. If this is all new to you, please ask for the mountain of information supporting this statement. And as I mentioned before we started, there is a series called The Moon, O the Moon. This PowerPoint is but an introduction, a mere surface level introduction of what you will find in this series, The Moon, O the Moon. The amount of detail in there will astound you. And I strongly, highly recommend that this series is gone over with a minute comb. Examine it, study it, understand it, and internalize it. Your eternal life depends on it. So, with this information on the word Chodesh behind us, what should Isaiah 66:23 read like with a proper translation according to the Hebrew word Chodesh? That word Chodesh, when applied to time, should mean new month. So let's insert that term new month into Isaiah 66:23. When we're reading this, I'm going to ask you to think, does it now make alignment when Isaiah said that the moon was not going to renew itself? That there will be no new moons in the kingdom of Yahuah? Is there now alignment? Does this relieve the problem of thinking that Isaiah is a liar and a false prophet? Let's read this verse with the proper Hebrew translation. And it shall be that from new month to new month, and from Shabbat to Shabbat, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuah. Do we have now scriptural alignment, progressive forward alignment? Is Isaiah now considered a true prophet? He never was considered a false prophet, but there was contamination that we have received from a certain era and area. Let's remove this lunar contamination. Suddenly, Isaiah's intelligence shines brilliantly once again. Isaiah knew about the Shane of Yahuah, and that is from Genesis 1:14. We're going to be wrapping this up now here shortly. We have a few more slides. Let's look at Jeremiah's wisdom. Jeremiah 8:2. And shall spread them before the sun and the moon, and all the hosts of heavens which they have loved, the hosts of the heavens which they have loved, and which they have served, and after which they have walked, which they have sought, and which they have bowed themselves. They shall not be gathered nor buried. They shall be for dung on the face of the earth. What does dung do? It wastes away to nothing. That is what happens to the people who go after that which they have made themselves, their own traditions. This is a very, very strong word from Jeremiah. What about Amos? Amos 5:21. I have despised your festivals, and I am not pleased with your assemblies. What reason did Yahuah supply to inspire Amos to record this incredulous statement of his severe displeasure? Amos 5:25. Did you bring me sacrifices and grain offerings in the desert for 40 years, nation of Israel? You carried along the statutes of the god Sekut and your king, or as your king, and the star Kiyun, the gods you made for yourselves. Do we see the star of Kiyun all over, especially this time of the year? Do we see that? Why is it around? Do we have anything to do with it? Should we be steering clear of it? Isaiah's very direct message, and this is a time when Israel was worshiping the moon, going after the lunar system. What does Isaiah say? You continue in apostasy. I wish I could make it any clearer than this, but I would fail at my attempt. It cannot get any clearer. When you are following after the lunar system of worship, that is apostasy. Isaiah then begins to document, you see that in Isaiah 1:10-17, he documents the traditions that insidiously infiltrated and contaminated the worship services of the Hebrew nation. Paying allegiance to the moon as a guiding identity is the top alarm of the list. Let that sink in. Pretty serious statement. This one is even more serious. Romans 6:16. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves servants for obedience, you are servants of the one whom you obey, whether of sin to death or of obedience to righteousness? It's something to seriously consider. I'm going to read this again. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves servants for obedience? Are we going after the lunar traditions of man? Or are we giving our allegiance to the Torah of Yahuah? That is the question. If we're going after this other system, we will be servants of the one whom we give our allegiance to. And it will be a consequence of sin to death, or it will be obedience to righteousness. Who do we give our allegiance to? That is my question to you today. This is the end. This has been a long PowerPoint. It's been intense. This is but an introduction. This is a surface level introduction to the series, The Moon, O the Moon. May Yahuah bless and guide you and give you wisdom and understanding. And I thank you for your time this morning on this Shabbat. Thank you for joining me. May you be blessed greatly.